October 10th, 2006. A 15-year-old boy lay dying in a hospital room in Monza, Italy. His name was Carlo Acutis, and leukemia was shutting down his body one system at a time. But in those final 48 hours, something happened. Something his mother would keep partly hidden for years, something she herself struggled to comprehend. Carlo opened his eyes from what looked like sleep and told her Mary, the Mother of God, had just visited him. And Mary had come with 3 promises, 3 guarantees about what would happen after his death. Carlo revealed the first 2. They already seemed impossible for a teenage boy on the edge of death, but the third promise, the one he made his mother swear not to reveal until the world was ready, was about death, heaven, and what happens after we leave this world. Within hours, Carlo would be gone. But those 3 promises were about to unfold in ways that would shake the Catholic Church and touch millions of young people around the globe. 2 of them seemed impossible. But the third, the one hidden for years, is the one that changes everything about how we understand dying. To understand why Mary spoke these words to Carlo, you need to know this. He was not a boy who claimed visions, performed miracles, or drew crowds. There were no stigmata, no levitations, no mystic phenomena. Carlo Acutis was a normal teenager living in Milan. He wore jeans and sneakers. He loved his PlayStation. He coded websites and edited videos. But there was something different about him, something that had quietly taken root when he was just 7. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It was hidden. While his parents weren't religious, Carlo had developed 2 deep devotions, the Eucharist and the Virgin Mary. After his first communion, he insisted on going to Mass every single day, before school, rain or shine. His mother didn't understand it. She hadn't taught him this. His father hadn't modeled it. Yet there was her son, waking early again and again, treating the Eucharist as the most important appointment of his day. He called it his highway to heaven. But it was his relationship with Mary that would become the key to everything that happened later. Carlo didn't just pray to Mary, he talked to her constantly. Walking to school, coding at his computer, lying in bed at night, he prayed the rosary daily and spoke to her like a child speaks to his mother, simple, direct, trusting. In late September 2006, Carlo began feeling off, headaches, fatigue, exhaustion that didn't go away. His parents chalked it up to too much screen time. But when his symptoms worsened, doctors ran tests. The results came fast. Acute promyelocytic leukemia, aggressive and advanced. Carlo was admitted to San Gerardo Hospital in Monza. Doctors told his parents this form of leukemia moved quickly, and Carlo's case was severe. They would try treatment, but they needed to prepare themselves for the worst. What's extraordinary is how Carlo responded. He didn't panic. He didn't ask, why me? There was no anger or despair. When the priest visited, Carlo made a startling request. He asked to offer his suffering for the Pope and for the Church. Not for himself, not for healing, but for others. His mother watched her son face death with peace she could not understand. He continued praying the rosary, he received communion, and he seemed to be waiting for something or someone. The leukemia advanced even faster than expected. Within a week, Carlo had days, not weeks. His body was failing, but his mind remained clear. And that's when the encounters began. His mother noticed it first. Carlo would close his eyes as if resting, but his expression would shift. Sometimes he smiled, not the forced smile of someone in pain, but a peaceful, genuine smile. Other times, his lips moved silently, as though speaking to someone. At moments, he seemed to be listening, his face tilting slightly, following a voice only he could hear. Even the nurses noticed. One said it looked as though Carlo had visitors they could not see. Then, on October 10th, just 2 days before his death, Carlo opened his eyes with unusual clarity. His mother was alone with him. "Mama," he whispered. She was here. Antonia knew immediately who he meant. But this time was different, Carlo continued. She came to me. She sat right here. He gestured weakly to the side of his bed, and she made me 3 promises. Carlo revealed the first promise. His work would not die with him. Mary told him the website he had created, documenting Eucharistic miracles from around the world, would not disappear. It would spread. It would travel to nations he had never seen. It would be translated into languages he did not speak. Young people who had never heard his name would encounter the Eucharist through his work. Carlo had spent a year creating this site, cataloguing over 137 Eucharistic miracles with meticulous research and photographs. He worried no one would ever see it. "She promised, Mama," he said, tearing up. "She promised it would reach millions." For a dying teenager, this promise seemed impossible. But Carlo believed her, and he told his mother there were 2 more promises still to come. Over the next hours, even as his pain increased, something in Carlo changed. There was anticipation in him, a quiet joy. He kept offering his suffering for others, especially young people, and he kept mentioning the remaining promises. On October 12, 2006, at around 6:45 a.m., Carlo Acutis died. His mother was beside him. She later said his final expression looked as though he was seeing something beautiful, something just beyond her sight. His funeral was small, family, friends, a few parishioners. Carlo had asked to be buried in Assisi, the city of St. Francis, and his parents honored his wish. For a moment it seemed like Carlo's story might quietly end there, but Mary had made a promise, and heaven keeps its promises. Within months, Antonia felt a persistent, strange conviction. She could not let Carlo's website remain hidden and unknown. She contacted priests, church leaders, anyone who would listen. Slowly, interest grew. Then, someone proposed turning Carlo's online project into a traveling exhibition. Panels could display the miracles Carlo had documented. They could be set up in churches, schools, and conferences. The idea became reality. The exhibition first traveled to churches in Italy, then to Europe, then to North and South America, then across the world, to Asia, Africa, Australia. What Carlo had created alone in his bedroom was now being seen by hundreds of thousands in person and millions online. And astonishingly, it wasn't just being seen. It was changing lives. Emails, letters, and testimonies poured in. People returned to the sacraments. Atheists began searching for God. Young people found inspiration in a boy who lived in their world, who used the internet, played video games, and still made holiness his priority. The exhibition was translated into dozens of languages, displayed in cathedrals and tiny parishes, shown in schools, seminaries, and conferences on every continent. In just a few years, Mary's first promise had been fulfilled, exactly as she told Carlo it would be. Antonia watched it all unfold with a mixture of awe and grief. Her son's work was spreading exactly as Mary had promised. The impossible was happening before her eyes. But Carlo had spoken of 3 promises, and only the first had revealed itself. If Mary had kept her word about the website, then what about the second promise? The one that seemed even more impossible. Because the second promise wasn't about a project or an exhibition. It was about Carlo himself, about what he would become back in that hospital room on October 10th. After Carlo had shared Mary's first promise, he had continued speaking. His voice was weak, nearly fading, yet his words came with startling clarity. Mary's second promise was this: he would become a sign for his generation. This promise was harder for him to explain, perhaps because it seemed so unattainable. Mary told him his short life, 15 ordinary years in Milan, would become a reference point for young people everywhere. Not because he had done anything spectacular, but precisely because he hadn't. He would show the world that sanctity wasn't reserved for mystics, monks, or Christians from centuries past. His life would answer a question so many young people were asking. Can someone live in the modern world, surrounded by technology, social media, video games, and constant pressure, and still become a saint? Carlo would be the answer. His life would prove that holiness is possible in the age of smartphones and the internet. But Mary had told him something else, something about the speed of it. She said it would happen faster than anyone expected, that the church would move quickly, unusually quickly. "Mama," Carlo whispered, "they will call me blessed." Then he hesitated, deciding whether to continue. "And more. But I can't think about that now. The third promise is what matters most." But he made her swear not to reveal the third promise until the right time, until the world could understand it. In 2013, just 7 years after Carlo's death, something remarkable happened. The Archdiocese of Milan officially opened his cause for beatification, the first step towards sainthood. 7 years. Most causes wait decades, even centuries. That Carlo's cause began so soon was itself extraordinary. But that was only the beginning. The investigation into his life moved with astonishing speed. Testimonies were gathered, his writings examined, his life scrutinized with the full rigor of the Church's standards, and what they found matched Mary's words exactly. An ordinary life lived with extraordinary fidelity. No public visions, no prophetic claims, no dramatic miracles during his lifetime. Just a boy who went to daily Mass, prayed the Rosary, used his technology's skills to evangelize, treated everyone with kindness, and faced death with a peace beyond explanation. In 2018, the Church declared him venerable, recognizing his heroic virtue. Then came the next requirement for beatification, a verified miracle. In Brazil, a young boy named Matthias was born with an annular pancreas, a rare defect where the pancreas constricts the small intestine. He couldn't eat properly and was constantly ill. Surgery was the only hope, but it was dangerous for someone so young. His parents learned about Carlo, the teenager who loved the Eucharist and suffered quietly through leukemia. Feeling a connection, they prayed to him for help. They touched one of Carlo's relics, a piece of his shirt, to their son. What happened next defied medical explanation. Matthias's condition vanished. He began eating normally. His symptoms disappeared when doctors re-examined him. The defect itself, the annular pancreas, was gone. A Vatican medical board reviewed the case and concluded it met every criterion of a miracle. Instantaneous, complete, lasting, and scientifically inexplicable. On October 10th, 2020, exactly 14 years after Carlo received Mary's 3 promises, he was beatified in Assisi. Thousands attended the ceremony in person, millions more watched online. Fitting for a teenager who had loved technology, a 15-year-old boy in jeans and sneakers had become blessed Carlo Acutis, one step away from sainthood. Just as Mary had promised, Carlo had become a sign for his generation. His cause had advanced faster than almost any modern cause in the Church. But it wasn't just official recognition. Young people around the world began discovering his story. His smiling face appeared in youth groups, classrooms, retreats, and college ministries. He didn't look like the saints in stained glass. He looked like the guy you'd sit next to in class, and that was exactly the point. Teens who thought faith was outdated encountered Carlo and said, "If he could do it, maybe I can too." He became, even unofficially, the patron of the digital generation, a title that spread naturally across social media and youth ministry. 2 promises fulfilled. The website reached the world. Carlo became a global sign for young people. He was beatified with unprecedented speed. But one promise remained, the one Carlo had been most excited about, the one his mother had hidden for years. After his beatification, pilgrims and journalists repeatedly asked Antonia, "Did Carlo say anything else? Did he know any of this would happen?" And she would smile, the smile of someone carrying a secret. "There was a third promise," she would say, "but Carlo made me wait." She explained that Carlo told her people needed to see the first 2 promises fulfilled before they could understand the third. For years she hinted at it, saying only that Mary had promised Carlo's mission would continue, that there was more, but she said nothing more. Then in 2023, something shifted. The investigation into Carlo's second miracle advanced. A woman in Costa Rica healed from severe head trauma after her family prayed to Carlo. The medical evidence was strong, and the Vatican was optimistic. Antonia knew it was time to reveal what Mary had actually promised her dying son about death, about heaven, about the real reason the Mother of God visited him in that hospital room. Because the third promise wasn't just about Carlo's future. It was about the nature of death itself, about the communion of saints, about how heaven and earth are more intertwined than we imagine. In late 2023, Antonia finally shared the full truth. And when people heard it, many wept. Because if Mary's third promise is true, and events seem to point in that direction, then everything we fear about death is wrong. Here's what Carlo told his mother that day. Here is the third promise. He would continue his mission from heaven with more power than he ever had on earth. That much Antonia had revealed before. But this is what she had kept hidden. Mary told Carlo specific details about how this mission would unfold. She told him that his death at 15 was not a tragedy, it was a transition, an elevation. From heaven, his ability to help souls would increase dramatically. His intercession would reach thousands, then millions. Prayers would be answered, conversions would happen, healings would occur, lives would be saved. But then came the part Carlo told only his mother, something Antonia kept secret for nearly 2 decades. Mary told Carlo she herself would ensure his intercession was effective, that she would stand beside him in heaven and carry every prayer offered through him directly to her son. That Carlo would be one of her chosen instruments, not because he was more holy than other saints, but because his youth, his modernity, his relatability would reach hearts that felt unreachable. And then Mary said the words that made Carlo weep in that hospital bed. You will save more souls in your first year in heaven than you could have saved in 100 years on earth. Your death is not the end of your mission. It is when your real mission begins, and I will be with you. Mary was telling him that dying young wasn't a loss, it was a promotion. Heaven isn't retirement for the faithful, it is the beginning of their greatest work. Carlo looked at his mother after sharing this and said, Mama, I'm not sad anymore. I'm excited. She showed me what I'll be able to do, the people I'll help. It's so much more than I could do here. Antonia didn't fully understand it then. How could she? Her son was dying, yet she held on to the promise, and then she watched it unfold before her eyes. Since Carlo's beatification in 2020, testimonies of graces received through his intercession have poured in from every continent. His tomb in Assisi, in the Sanctuary of Renunciation, has become one of the most visited pilgrimage sites in Italy. And these aren't the typical pilgrims. Many are teenagers, college students, and young adults. They come wearing jeans and carrying smartphones, just like Carlo. They arrive with prayers, often desperate ones. The kind young people whisper only when they feel misunderstood or unseen. Reports of healings, conversions, answered prayers, and moments of clarity in deep darkness flow in weekly. The second miracle leading to Carlo's canonization only strengthened this. A woman in Costa Rica with life-threatening head trauma recovered after her mother prayed to Carlo. Medical records described injuries incompatible with recovery, yet she healed completely. And so on September 7th, 2025, Carlo Acutis was canonized. Saint Carlo Acutis, just 15 years old when he died in 2006, became a saint in less than 20 years, one of the fastest canonizations in modern church history. Just as Mary had promised, the church moved quickly. But the numbers tell only part of the story. The real fulfillment of Mary's third promise is found in the countless individual lives touched by Carlo's intercession. There is the teenager in the United States who had planned his suicide, feeling purposeless and lost. He had chosen a specific date to end his life. Days before, a friend randomly sent him an article about Carlo Acutis. He read it, learned about a boy his age who had found deep purpose and faith. Something shifted inside him. He abandoned his plan. Today, he credits Carlo's intercession with saving his life and he is now studying for the priesthood. There is the grieving mother in the Philippines whose teenage daughter died in an accident. Paralyzed by grief, she could barely function. Someone gave her a prayer card with Carlo's image. She began praying, asking Carlo to help her understand how God could take her child so young. She says Carlo's intercession gave her peace, not answers, but the strength to keep living. There are countless young people who return to Mass after encountering Carlo's story, who began praying the Rosary because he prayed it, who chose to use their tech skills for evangelization because he showed them it was possible, who faced illness or death with courage because he had shown them how. One young man in India, dying of terminal cancer at 19, learned about Carlo and began praying to him, terrified of dying so young. He begged Carlo to help him face death with faith. In his final weeks, his family said he experienced a peace they could not explain. He died praying the Rosary, just like Carlo. Mary's promise that Carlo would continue his mission from heaven, that his intercession would be powerful, that she herself would ensure his heavenly work bore fruit. Every part of it is being fulfilled. The boy who died at 15 has become one of the most invoked young saints in the Church. And here is the most remarkable part. Antonia says it is accelerating. Since his canonization, the reports have multiplied. It is as though every step of official recognition releases more grace, reaches more souls, and completes Mary's promise more deeply. Carlo is doing exactly what Mary said he would do, saving more souls from heaven than he ever could have on earth. When you trace how Mary's 3 promises unfolded, something becomes clear. She knew exactly what she was doing in that hospital room. She knew Carlo's death at 15 would look like a tragedy, that his parents would struggle, that the world would see a life cut short. So she gave Carlo, through him, his mother, and ultimately all of us, a different lens through which to understand his death. The promises were not simply comfort, they were revelation. They revealed that God's plans operate on a different timeline and scale, that what looks like an ending is often the beginning, that influence and impact are not measured in years lived, but in faithfulness given. Mary promised Carlo's work would not die because she knew his death would amplify it. A teenager who created a website about Eucharistic miracles and died at 15 is far more compelling than an elderly man who did the same and lived to 90. His youth, his purity, his simplicity, his digital creativity, they all became part of his mission. She promised he would be a sign for his generation, because she knew the modern world desperately needed proof that young people could become saints. Not medieval saints, not ancient saints, but saints who understood Wi-Fi, social media, and video games. Carlo's life answered a question modern hearts were asking, and she promised his mission would continue from heaven, that he would be more effective in death than in life, because that is exactly how God's economy works. The grain of wheat that falls to the ground and dies produces much fruit. Carlo's death was the moment his mission truly began. But there is something even deeper. By giving Carlo these 3 promises, Mary was teaching us something essential about death itself. She was saying, death is not the end of your mission. It is not retirement. It is not silence. For those who die in Christ, death is a change of assignment. Heaven is not a vacation. It is where the real work, the eternal work, begins. For Antonia Acutis, Carlo's mother, the 3 promises Mary gave her son became both a burden and a gift. A burden because she had to watch her child die while clinging to promises that sounded impossible. How could a dead teenager's simple website reach the world? How could the Church move quickly to recognize someone so young? How could his intercession be more powerful after death than during life? In the early months after Carlo died, believing the promises required enormous faith. But as each promise began unfolding one by one, the burden slowly transformed into a gift. Antonia realized she hadn't lost her son. She had gained a mission. She became the guardian of Carlo's story, the witness Mary had chosen. She travels the world sharing what happened in that hospital room, what Mary promised, and how every word came true. In interviews, she often says that Carlo feels more present to her now than when he was alive, that she recognizes him in the lives transformed by his intercession, in the messages she receives, in the young people who kneel at his tomb. Mary's promises to Carlo became promises to her as well, that her son's life mattered, that his death had meaning, and that love is stronger than death. And now, with all three promises fulfilled, his website reaching millions, Carlo canonized, and his intercession touching lives every single day, Antonia says she finally understands why Mary came to that hospital room. Mary came to tell Carlo, and through him all of us, that we have nothing to fear, that God keeps his promises, that death is not the end, and that our mission continues, perhaps even more powerfully, on the other side. These three promises were never just for Carlo. They were for everyone who hears this story, because woven into these promises are truths every soul needs. From the first promise, your work matters beyond your lifetime. You don't have to see the fruit of your faithfulness for it to matter. Carlo never knew his website would reach millions. He never saw the exhibition that now travels the world. He thought he'd created a small project to help a few people, but he did it faithfully because it mattered to God. How many of us hold back because we can't see the impact? How many think, I'm just one person? What difference can I make? Carlo's story answers. Do the faithful thing in front of you, and trust God with the multiplication. Your work may just be beginning at the very moment you think it has ended. From the second promise, holiness is found in ordinary faithfulness. You don't need visions or miracles to become a saint. You need to show up. Daily mass, daily prayer, daily kindness, daily use of your gifts for God. Carlo didn't do anything you can't do. He prayed, he went to church, he was kind. He used technology for good. The modern world insists everything must be extraordinary to matter. Mary told Carlo the opposite. The extraordinary hides inside the ordinary. Faithfulness in small things transforms everything over time. St. Carlo Acutis proves that holiness isn't for the few. It's available right now, where you are, in the choices you make every day. From the third promise, the most profound of all. Death is not the end of your mission. Our mission doesn't end when our heart stops beating. For those who die in Christ, death is a change in assignment. Carlo is accomplishing more from heaven than he could have done in 100 years on earth. This promise speaks to every person who fears death, your own or that of someone you love. It speaks to parents who lose children and wonder if their child's potential died with them. It speaks to anyone who dies young or who watches someone die young. Mary's promise says, this is not the end. This is not meaningless. The mission continues. Heaven is not retirement. It's where the real work begins. If you're young and wondering whether your life matters, if you're struggling with faith in a secular world, if you fear dying before accomplishing your dreams, Carlo's story is for you. Mary's promises whisper, your faithfulness matters now. Your influence will outlive you. And death is not the end of anything that truly matters. But there is something even deeper, something beneath the three promises. A promise behind the promises, an assurance woven into everything Mary told Carlo. God keeps his word. Heaven is real. Your faithfulness has eternal weight. And Mary will be there for every soul who seeks her son. That is what she was truly promising in that hospital room. Not simply that Carlo's website would spread. Not simply that he would be canonized. Not simply that his intercession would be powerful. She was promising that everything Jesus said is true, that the kingdom of God is real, that death has been defeated, and that love wins. Carlo could die in peace because Mary's promises weren't ultimately about him, They were about the faithfulness of God. Trust this, she was saying. Your life is in God's hands. Everything you've believed is true. And when you close your eyes in death, you will open them in life. And she was right. On October 12th, 2006, a 15-year-old boy died in a hospital in Monza, Italy. His death certificate recorded a life of 15 years and 5 months. It listed acute promyelocytic leukemia as the cause. It documented an ending. But the certificate didn't know about the 3 promises. It didn't know Mary had visited that room. It didn't know that what looked like an ending was actually a beginning. Nearly 20 years later, every promise has been fulfilled. Carlo's work spreads across the world. He is not just a sign for his generation. He is a saint for the universal church. His intercession flows daily from heaven, healing bodies, converting hearts, and bringing young people back to faith. The promises weren't predictions, they were guarantees. Mary wasn't forecasting the future, she was declaring it. She knew her son. She knew how his grace multiplies. She knew that a grain of wheat falling into the ground in a hospital in Monza would produce unimaginable fruit. Today, St. Carlo Acutis, a boy in jeans and sneakers, is invoked by millions, the patron saint of the internet, the living proof that holiness is possible in the modern world, the teenager who shows us that ordinary life can become the path to heaven. And somewhere in heaven, where Carlo now lives fully alive, he's surely smiling, watching his mother fulfill her mission just as faithfully as he fulfilled his. Because on the day he closed his eyes for the last time, he opened them to see her face. The 3 promises Mary gave Carlo before he died were never just for a dying teenager in 2006. They are for you, right now, reading this, a reminder that your faithfulness matters, that your ordinary life can become extraordinary, and that death is not the end of anything that truly matters. Mary kept her promises to Carlo, and she will keep her promises to you.